guys, welcome back to Scott Family Homestead. I'm so happy you're here today because we're going to discuss our greenhouse. We have the Glacier Series greenhouse from Growers Solution, and we've been using it to grow here in Zone 4. We're going to talk a little bit today about why we chose this style, what we like about it, what we dislike about it, the optional features that we had added on, and I'm going to show you what we're growing in here today, and I'm going to show you how we utilize this here on our homestead. So, like I said, we are Zone 4. Our last frost date is late May, and our first frost date is near the end of September. So we have a 130-day growing season here in Wisconsin, and it's not a terribly long growing season to grow some of the things that really love heat. I often see people giving the advice of not to plant your peppers until you have 50-degree temperatures at night as a low consistently. Well, here in Wisconsin, you're not going to get that. It is July and we still have nights in the 40s. So one of the things that we like to utilize for our heat-loving plants is a greenhouse, and we have seen huge increases in production utilizing this. Now, if you have been following us for a while, you probably know that we recently moved here about a year ago and put up this greenhouse, but we also had the same style greenhouse in our old homestead. So not only did we decide on this style for this farm and this homestead, we also had experience with it on another farm and decided to buy it again, but longer and bigger. Let's talk about why we chose this over other styles of greenhouse. The number one reason is going to be the shape. This greenhouse can shed snow, which where we are in northern Wisconsin is a huge deal. It's something that we definitely need. Now, we did have issues with our previous greenhouse because we made sure that it had no snow on the top. One thing we were not great about was clearing snow from this part right here. You need to keep this clear so that the snow can continue to shed. What ended up happening with our old greenhouse, we had moved here and our house was not yet for sale, our previous homestead, and we got 18 inches of snow in one night. It ended up collapsing a couple of our trusses because it was a super heavy snow that came really, really quickly, and there was snow right here that hadn't been cleared away. So while it does shed snow really well, it still takes maintenance. You can't just leave this, if you are in a heavy snow area, you can't just leave it throughout the winter and let it do its thing. You're still going to have to clear this and take care of it. It still has its benefits over a high wall greenhouse or a smaller greenhouse, in my opinion. The plastic held up really well. That was perfectly fine. It was the weight of the snow that was a real problem. I can show you the trusses up close in just a minute, but this is a very easy one to build. The most time-consuming part is squaring everything up. Once you have your 4 corner posts, you're putting posts in every 4 feet. You build your arches separately, and then you flip those arches up and drop them into the posts, and you've got yourself a greenhouse. It does go pretty quickly once you're all squared up and have your base posts in. We did purchase a couple of options on this, one being the end walls. You can build your own end walls or you can purchase them. We purchased ours, and you build it to fit whatever size door you want to put in. We're going to put a door on the back side as well so that we can get out to our orchard. But we did have the end walls put up. And the other option that we got was the roll-up sides. I don't know how you could really go without them because it does get very warm in there. So unless you're going to have some other kind of ventilation, I suggest having the roll-up sides. A couple of common questions we get is space and where to set up a high tunnel. You definitely want it to be fairly level. Now you can kind of see back here, but our property is very hilly. We actually have our cows back here. They come all the way around the other side. But this is right off of our driveway, and it is a fairly flat area, and so that was a good location for a high tunnel. That also determined the length of our high tunnel. It drops off after this, and so we definitely didn't want to go more than 48 feet for that reason. The other thing I get asked a lot is why we call it a high tunnel and not a greenhouse. And this is kind of personal preference, but the way I see it, a greenhouse is a more regulated environment, and they usually have heaters for when it gets cool and fans for when it gets warm. They have electric, and they have more control over the environment inside. This is simply a tunnel. It doesn't have the features that I consider a greenhouse. Like when you go to buy your plants from a greenhouse and you go into these regulated buildings, This just doesn't have all that. It's basically plastic over arches. It's like when you think about like a hoop house, it's just a bigger hoop house. So we call it a high tunnel. I know a lot of other people that do too, but if you prefer, you can call it a greenhouse. It's interchangeable, really. But the reason I call it a high tunnel is because we are not regulating the temperature other than what conditions we're given by nature and the sun. So we're just capturing more heat and controlling the water more specifically ourselves. You could add irrigation into here. I would love to have irrigation. Ryan, I would love to have irrigation. We don't yet. We water this with a hose every evening, but you could add fans. You could add more features to it. We just don't have all of that I would really consider a greenhouse. So we call it the high tunnel. But let's go take a closer look. As we walk up, you can see we put a little raised bed garden in the front. This is still a work in progress. These are just cheap Amazon raised beds, and we got some cattle panel arches there for pole beans that are going to fill in. We've got our Greenstalks. We got our bunnies in here. They love it because they get all kinds of fresh food. And then we have our in-ground garden out this way. It's struggling with the weeds a little bit and definitely moisture. We've had a very, very rainy year. It is really causing a lot of issues in our in-ground garden. But let's take a look over here. As you can see, this is our roll-up sides. So you have the strapping, which helps guide it. This is 48 feet long, and I can roll up the side just by myself. So it has a crank on it, and we loop it up here, and it gives you a nice airflow right down near the plants. Here you can see every 4 feet we've got one of our arches. Like I said, this is 48 feet long. It is 30 feet wide, so that gives you a ton of growing space. When you order this, how you do it, you just pay for the number of arches that you get. So you can make this as long as you would like. You do have shorter options available. Our other one was 32 feet, I believe. So we went just a little bit longer on this one this time. And I have no regrets about that. I love the growing space, so I would definitely do it again, nice and long like this. But anyways, you can see these, and then we also have the wood support down here. Let me bring you in closer. All right, I've got some grass growing in here, so it's a little bit tougher to see. These are the posts that you put down to start. So every 4 feet, you're putting down one of these posts that your arch fits inside of. Then you're going to build your arches and put those up. And then we put on the 2x6s. We did 8-foot 2x6s this time. We did 16-foot last time. It was definitely worth it because you get less of this issue here. Then you brace those on at the level of the roll-up sides. You also do the 2x6 bracing. Again, I would do the longer one just to make it a little more simple. Here we have the strapping for our roll-up sides. You can see that all the way down. And this is how you put on your plastic. This is called wiggle wire. So you put on these frames, pull the plastic up over the top. We can talk about that in a minute as well. And then this holds it tight. So that's what it looks like from the side. Let's take a look inside next. We still need to put a header in here and secure our plastic around the door frame. It's one of those projects that's just going to be one of the last things done. Okay, on the inside here now, looking at the exact opposite side of where we were just standing, we're also attaching all of our arches to this 2x6. We've got our frame here with the wiggle wire that pulls the plastic nice and tight. And this is what it looks like from the inside. You have 5 full-length bars up here for support. So you've got 1 on each side and then 3 up towards the top. And then each of these arches has its own truss style. So that adds support up here as well. And then also the metal end walls. And so there's a lot of support in here. Okay, let's talk about putting the plastic on for a second because we've actually done this 2 ways. With our first high tunnel, we used scaffolding in the middle, and we actually went from one end to the other. So we had somebody towards the peak and people on the bottom on each side, and we pulled it over. That was very difficult. At the time we thought, okay, that wasn't that bad. We were able to do it. We had about 6 adults do it. This last time we lined up all along the edge. We tied some baseballs into it with ropes and threw it over the top. Because you have these 5 supports, you are able to throw it up over top and then pull from the other side, and it went over so much easier. So I definitely recommend doing it that way if you're putting together a greenhouse. It does seem to go pretty easy because of the way these arches are. It kind of just slides right up and over. So definitely easier to go that way than it is to go end to end. We learned our lesson on that one. We'll see how long it makes it with our winters and everything else. Obviously this is first year plastic right now. We only had our other high tunnel for 1 year, so I can't give you a total review on the plastic. I will say that it tightened up really nicely on here, and even when it's really windy, we don't get a whole lot of bubbling happening with it. Speaking of the wind, if it's really windy out, we put both of the sides down. If it is like lightly windy and we think it might be a little bit of an issue, we close the side that the wind is coming from and leave the other side open. Like I said, it does get very warm in here. I can feel it getting warm already, and it's early in the morning. So it is really nice to have the open sides. And another hugely beneficial part of having the open sides is that all of your self-pollinating plants are going to get pollinated. So you don't have to come through here and shake all of your tomato plants to try to get them pollinated. They are shaking in the wind all day long, a little bit of breeze, and that's pollinating so that we can get our tomatoes without having to go and like tap every plant. So you're not going to have the bees and the bugs in here the way that you would out in your garden. If you don't have the roll-up sides or some way to get some airflow through here, you're going to have to manually pollinate a lot of your plants. I would also plan on pollinating if you're growing squash or anything where you need that bee pollination. I would plan on hand pollinating for a lot of those things, just because you're not going to have as much bugs in here. Now that's not to say you're not going to have any. You do get some, and they will fly up towards the top, and there's not really a way to get them out. So there's going to be some loss there. We find it's mostly flies and bugs like that. We don't see a lot of bees in here. Mostly what we grow in here is peppers and tomatoes. I've got 4 rows of peppers here. You can see we have T-posts, and we're using Florida weave here. We've got a whole bunch of peppers, and then we have something like 80 tomatoes towards the back. I do have some other things in here. We've got our garlic is here, which is not ideal. I would not do this again on purpose. I would much rather have it planted outside. But I planted this last fall not knowing that we were going to purchase a high tunnel. And so it kind of got stuck in here because this is the location that we chose for the high tunnel. That's going to get pulled out today. It is looking done. And we'll see how that did in here because the heat is definitely intense for garlic. I also have a trellis of cucumbers here. These are starting to flower and produce, and so they're going to grow up and over where my garlic was once we pull that out. I've got some zinnias down here just for fun, and then along both sides, all the way down on both sides, we have bush beans. We should have a pretty good crop of that as well. So this is definitely our production area. This is for the stuff that we want to can and that we want a lot of. You'll see that in what I'm showing you. It's all the pickles and the green beans, the peppers, the tomatoes, all the things that we want large quantities of are growing in here. Now what you won't see is our cool weather things. So our cabbages and broccolis, kales, lettuces, those are going to get planted in here come fall time, and we're going to see how long we can stretch our season out. So make sure you're subscribed and following along because I'm really excited to experiment with how long we can do that. With my last high tunnel, I had a baby in the middle of September, and so I never got a fall crop in. And I'm really excited to see how long we can extend our season. I had a Pelram greenhouse, like a small 8x8 structured, you know, the typical pretty greenhouse in my last garden, and what would happen is at night it would get just as cool in there as it did at air temperature. It just took longer to get there, and so if it was going to be 32 degrees outside, it was going to get 32 degrees in that little greenhouse. It just held the heat for a little bit longer into the evening and nighttime hours. I do not have a thermostat in here, so I can't tell you exactly what happens with this. I assume that it's similar The benefit with this is that your soil is going to stay really warm in here because it warms so much during the day. So as far as season extension, this did not get put up until very late May, so I didn't get spring season extension. But as far as that goes, I'll be able to tell you more after this fall. We'll see how far we can stretch our cool weather plants. I did buy some kales and lettuces that are supposedly the most cold hardy, and those are the ones we're going to try. We'll probably do a whole variety of things, but that's what I really want to try, is see how much we can get that kale and lettuce to extend late into the season. We'll try a whole bunch of stuff in here. So we'll have a video coming on that in the fall time, and I'm really excited for that. But for now, let me show you what we've got growing in here. As far as the question, is it worth it? I will tell you that my plants in here are more than double the size of my in-ground garden. It's easier to manage and maintain them in here, and we've been having a crazy amount of rain this year, just way more than I've ever experienced in growing a garden. And so some of my plants are really struggling out there, whereas in here I completely control the moisture levels. We have clay soil here. How often you water this is going to depend on what kind of soil you're dealing with. But our clay soil does hold a lot of water, and so I don't overwater. I just water a little bit every evening. Everybody gets watered because it does dry out on the surface during the day. These are the pepper plants. I have a couple eggplants in here as well. They really like the heat. Now, if you live in the south, this pepper plant probably doesn't look that impressive, but I've been growing in northern Wisconsin for about 10 years now, and I have not had pepper plants thrive the way that they are in here this year. We are already setting fruit, and I was able to plant these in June. It is now just after the 4th of July, and they are doing amazingly. So we've got 4 rows of peppers. I do sweet peppers over here. I've got hot peppers back here. I always keep them separated so the kids don't go and grab hot peppers on accident. They know that the first 2 rows of peppers, once these come in, are safe for eating. And we've got, I don't even know, probably 12 to 15 varieties of peppers in here. And then we have the eggplants as well. We had sunflowers in this general area last year, and so when we tilled this in, we ended up with some volunteer sunflowers. And if you look out here, there's a whole patch of them. So just outside of the high tunnel on this side is pretty much all volunteer sunflowers. And a couple came up in the high tunnel, and we just left them for fun. We'll see how they do. They don't seem to be taking nutrients from any of the other plants, so we're going to go ahead and leave them. You can see these beans are small. We planted these last week. I did not want all my beans to be ready at the exact same time, so these were planted later on. These are contender beans, and then I'll show you the beans on the other side. Here are our first batch of beans. These are contender beans, and they go the full row. They are a little bit harder to weed out of here, so we've kind of just let them go. And they go all the way down towards the back and should be flowering pretty soon here. Okay, let's talk about this tomato jungle. These are probably my tallest tomato plants right now, so they're almost shoulder height. These are my Amish Paste. You can see we are using the Florida weave here. We use a nylon string. You don't want to use like a jute twine because it does break down with water. So we're using a nylon string. We heavily prune the bottom of our tomatoes. These are getting quite weedy down here. We'll talk about that in a minute. This one is definitely due for a couple more strings. I find that it does hold them really well. We have T-posts on either side, and I really think ideally we should have one right in the middle as well. It just keeps this a little bit tighter. But so far, this is working really well. This is what I did in my last high tunnel as well. And the tomato plants are just growing So nice. They are already fruiting. You can see quite a bit of, these are German red tomatoes in here. We've got our Amish Paste coming in here. I don't know the exact number of varieties in here. Say we probably have somewhere around 20 varieties of tomatoes in this greenhouse. You can see the cherry tomatoes are all coming in really nice and thick. These are purple bumblebee and pink bumblebee in this whole row. We like those for roasted salsa, and so we grow a whole bunch of those. These Amish Paste back in here, these are our canning tomatoes. The Amish Paste, they originate from the Wisconsin area and they are growing really well here. Those are coming in thick. Okay, so our Florida weave is tied on the other end. It comes all the way down here. We wrap it around here several times. And then on the way back, it weaves around each of the plants. And so you will see, if I can separate these leaves here, it crisscrosses. It crisscrosses here. Then you have the plant come through. See how sturdy and tight that is? Then it crisscrosses again before it gets to the next plant. You crisscross it between every plant, and you put several layers of this, and it becomes a really nice trellis. With this method, I do suggest a heavy pruning on the bottom because it really helps everything get established and stand straight, and it makes it easier to water without splashback up onto your leaves. You can see behind me the rows are kind of coming together, they're arching together. This is just because they need more layers of twine. We'll get that put up today or tomorrow, and they will straighten right up towards the sun. The last thing, I think I forgot to mention this, but towards the back here we're also planting cantaloupes and melons. They are really enjoying the heat. These could use a little bit of fertilizer. We've got cantaloupes on this side. And then on this side over here, we've got some watermelons. And then we're back over to our beans over here. Couple, you can see one right there. A couple of squash in here just to see how they would do. I put them near the end walls. We'll see about pollination. That's a really experimental one for me, and I planted it super late. So we'll have to see how that goes. As you can tell, around the base of these plants, a lot of them need weeding. Just a year ago, this was a hayfield, and so we are fighting grass like crazy. That really gave me three options. We could do ground cover between all of these rows to try to kill out the grass for this year while we grow some plants. The other option is to mulch heavily. However, once the grass comes up through the mulch, it is so hard to remove. So we went with a third option, which was bare soil in here. I know that not everybody's going to agree with that, but that is what we're doing while we fight this grass and get it knocked back. And we use two tools for weeding that have been hugely beneficial. I would not do this. I would not grow a high tunnel without these two tools. The first being this Haas cultivator. This right here, it has no motor to it, but it has the wheels on the front. It has different attachments. Right here we have the cultivator on. My husband likes to use this one. I like the weed bar. And you can go in between the rows with this and take out a huge amount of weeds very quickly, very easily. I love this because it has the long handles and you don't have to crouch over to use this. This one has the cultivator on it. It also has other attachments. And this, you can just push it along, pull it back, push it along, and it pulls up all the weeds in between your rows. We just used this tool last night. This is what our rows look like after going through. Now the cultivator works great between rows, but it does leave you with grass around the base of each plant. So that is where I use this tool. This is from Barebones. It's very sharp on the end and you can easily sharpen it if it starts to get dull. It's just a hand tool you can pull between your plants and take down all of that grass. This one I highly recommend whether you're gardening in a high tunnel greenhouse, raised beds, in-ground, whatever it is, this is probably one of my #1 recommended tools. This and a Hori Hori. I feel like that's a highly recommended one, pretty much across the board, a very multi-use tool. But this one right here is going to get all of your weeding done close to your plants. So come through, you go just below the dirt level with this, and it just pulls right out. And there you have it. Makes weeding so much easier. Now we just have to do it for all these rows. I do have a couple of garden beds near the door here. These are the kids' garden beds. This one's Harrison's, and he's got red swan beans that are flowering there. He's got some zinnias, carrots, lettuce. And then on the other side we've got Micah's. His needs a little bit more weeding. I'm trying to teach them to weed their own spaces. Micah is younger than Harrison, but he's keeping up pretty well. We've got coleus, kale, lots of flowers, marigolds, carrots, coleus, and a few little fairies. Before I sign off, we're going to pull this garlic and see how it grew in here. I have something like 60 heads of garlic, I believe. A lot of this will get replanted for next year, but we're going to go ahead and see how much we're going to have to preserve. I have a video about freeze-drying garlic, and I have to say that's probably my very favorite way to do it. I can turn it into a garlic powder or minced garlic, and I really enjoyed having that on hand. And then I'll keep some of this fresh as well. This is a hardneck garlic. We already took the scapes off. What you're looking for is for the bottom to yellow up, at least 3 of the leaves to be yellowing. I can see that this is yellowing both on the bottom and the top, and so I'm pretty confident that this is done growing for the year, so we're going to go ahead and get it all pulled up. Oh, they're not bad. Look at that one. That's a nice one. It's not too bad. We got some really nice ones in here. So I'm happy with that because I wasn't sure how this was going to go in the high tunnel. But pretty good. I did fertilize these once, probably about a month ago. I did one of the shake-on fertilizers, but otherwise this was just planted in an old hayfield. So I'm pretty happy with this. There are some smaller ones, but garlic is garlic. We'll be able to use this and we'll be good all winter long. All right, here is our garlic crop. I think we did all right. This will sit out where it is dry and cure for a bit before we do anything else with it. I've been entirely out of garlic. I did not plant any the fall before last because we were moving. Well, I did plant some, but I left it at our old house, and so I didn't have any garlic last year, and I am so excited because it's been 2 years without garlic now. So we've got some smaller ones. We've also got some larger ones in there. And I'm really happy with this. The first big harvest out of the high tunnel this year. Before I leave, I want to show you some of our exterior garden. This is where we do more of our cool stuff. So we've got carrots in here, good Mother Stollard beans starting to climb here. We've got kale, got another set of beans over here. We've got lettuces that are just about done. You can see a lot of them have flowered. There's some more kale in here and then a cabbage on the end. These are mostly getting fed to the bunnies, which is why we love having them in this garden. And then I've got a bunch of herbs over here. We've got some radishes yet. Little bun. This is Marbles. He's a mini Rex. He was our first bunny. Over on this side we have April. Savannah's feeding April some lettuce. She is our Holland Lop. They're the best of friends. Yeah. And then on this arched trellis, this is just a cattle panel. We've got our purple potted pole beans. These are from beans that I saved from our old homestead. And they are climbing like crazy, so I'm very excited about those. We also have a little seating area in here, which is really nice. We've got a large tree over here that shades it in the morning, which is a very nice place to sit. And then we have our Greenstalks. This one has mostly strawberries in it. I've got some micro tomatoes, the orange hat tomatoes. Those are full of tomatoes and ripening up soon. And then a whole top of nasturtiums. Oh, I got 2 types in there. This one was all greens. They've all gotten pretty much too warm to handle it. I do have these little Tom Thumb peas up top that are still doing well, and the kids love those, so I would definitely plant those again. But the kales and lettuces in here are just about done. These will get pulled for the bunnies, and then we will replant something in here. Greenstalk is having their anniversary sale right now. I do have a $10 off code, so I'll leave that in the description. I currently have 4 of these. We've got one in front of the house full of greens too, and I can't speak highly enough of them. They have their own watering system, and they grow just a crazy large amount of food. The leaf planters like this one here, they have 42 pockets. You can plant 42 plants of lettuces, kales, greens, just about anything that you want to plant in there you can. If you do not have the room for a high tunnel like this or a greenhouse, you just have a patio, this is a great place to get started. Or if you have friends that you want to get into gardening and they don't have a huge amount of space, this is a great patio setup. Growers Solution has so many varieties. We're not sponsored by them or anything, but varieties of high tunnels and greenhouses available, and they have competitive pricing on it. We did go through them because of the pricing, but you do have to consider the lumber that you have to buy, all those 2x6s depending on your length and everything. So I'm not going to give you an exact number. They also run deals on their freight shipping occasionally. Usually in the fall they do one, and I think they just had one. I'm not sure if it's done yet or not. But they do free shipping over a certain dollar amount. Again, I don't have the exact details, and it probably varies depending on when they're offering their sale, but they do occasional free freight shipping, which will save you hundreds of dollars if you can hit one of those sales. If you have any other questions about working with Grower Solution, they have great customer service. I will say that we've had some issues where we had to call them and ask for some assistance, and they have been really great. So I do recommend them. But if you have any more questions about this greenhouse in particular, or our experience with Grower Solution, or just experience of growing in a high tunnel in general, go ahead and shoot us a message, leave a comment. We're on Instagram, Facebook. You can find us pretty much everywhere, Scott Family Homestead. We're so happy that you're here. Thank you for watching today and hanging out with me. I hope I answered your questions, but if not, make sure you ask, and maybe we'll do a follow-up video. Please subscribe, make sure you hit the notifications button so you get notified when we put out a new video. We're trying to put out weekly and bi-weekly videos depending on our schedule, and we appreciate every single one of you that helps our family by watching our channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye guys.